taxpayer-funded subsidies. The time to repeal these giveaways is now. Mr. President, I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Senator from Maryland.
Yes, the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I want to concur with Senator Schumer on his comments about the passage of Senator Menendez's legislation, S-2204. This legislation is very important for America's energy needs, and I urge my colleagues to allow us to take this legislation up, and let's act on it, and let's move it to the other body. There's one commodity just about everyone knows the price of: a gallon of gasoline. People will have a rough idea what a gallon of milk or a dozen eggs or a loaf of bread costs, but they'll know to the penny what a gallon of gasoline costs. The price is rising, and people are understandably upset. They're upset because it costs more to fill up at the pump, but they're also upset because crude oil and gasoline price increases affect the price of every other commodity, including milk, eggs, and bread, that has to be transported from where it's produced to where it's consumed. And petroleum is a feedstock used in the production, not just transportation, and so many critical products, including fertilizers. According to the United States Energy Information Agency, EIA, the retail price of gasoline of a regular unleaded was 27 cents higher for the week ending March 5th, 2012 than it was a year ago. EIA reports that vehicles' fueling costs for the average U.S. household will be about $238 higher in 2012 than 2011. According to EIA, the price of gasoline has increased dramatically every year. 2011 higher than 2010, and 2012 is projected to be higher than 2011. This price increase is occurring despite the fact that the United States has stepped up its crude oil production considerably over the past 4 years by 1.3 million barrels per day. Production is at an 8-year high. The U.S. is the third largest producer of oil behind the Saudis and Russia. And domestic oil consumption is at a 15-year low. Americans are driving 35 billion fewer miles a day than they did in 2010. If we were producing more and consuming less, then why are prices going up? Now, supply and demand would tell us that they should be going down. The answer to that question is straightforward. Crude oil and all the products derived from it, including gasoline, are fungible commodities traded on world markets. Increasing global demand for these commodities is putting a relentless upward pressure on prices. Growing demand for oil in developing countries has reshaped the global market. Developing nations now consume 47% of the world's oil. In 1970, it was 25%. The number of cars in the world exceeded 1 billion for the first time in 2010, with one half of the global growth occurring in China. Beijing adds 1,500 new cars every day. Another reason for price increases is market uncertainty over crude oil supplies. Much of the world's crude oil is produced in the Middle East and North Africa, regions plagued with turmoil. Right now, the United States accounts for about 9 to 11% of the world's crude oil production. This is despite the fact that we have less than 2% of the world's total proven oil reserves. We have 2% of the world's reserves, and we're producing 9 to 11%. We are, in fact, drilling here and drilling now with more oil rigs in operation than the rest of the world combined, according to the Baker Hughes recount. According to economist Dean Baker at the Center for Economic and Policy Research, even if the U.S. productions could be increased by 1/3 overnight, that would increase world supply by 3%, which would lower price of oil by 7 to 8%. As Baker notes, this is not trivial, but it's not the difference between $2 a gallon gas and $4 a gallon gas. T. Boone Pickens said it best, "I've been an oil man all my life, but this is one emergency we can't drill our way out of." A recent Associated Press fact-check analysis found there is no correlation between domestic oil production and the price at the pump. I'm for reasonable oil production. We need as much as we can get in a reasonable manner. As the report in the Washington Post on March 21st pointed out, and I quote, "A statistical analysis of 36 years of monthly inflated adjusted gasoline prices and U.S. domestic oil production by the Associated Press shows no statistical correlation between how much oil comes out of U.S. wells and the price at the pump. More oil production in the United States does not mean consistently lower prices at the pump. U.S. oil production is back to the same level it was in March 2003, when gas cost $2.10 per gallon when adjusted for inflation. But that's not what prices are now. That's because oil is a global commodity and U.S. production has only a tiny influence on supply. Factors far beyond the control of a nation or a president's dictate the price of gasoline," end quote. The United States is incapable of having a significant impact on world crude oil and gasoline prices from the supply side of the equation. But domestic oil production does play an important role in bolstering our energy and economic security. We should produce where we can in a safe and environmentally sensitive manner. While increasing domestic production and decreasing domestic demand may not be lowering world price, it does have a significant effect on imports. Our dependence on foreign oil is at its lowest level in 16 years. As a share of total consumption, oil imports declined from nearly 60% in 2005 to 45% last year, the lowest level since 1995. And nearly one-half of our imports come from the Western Hemisphere nations, such as Canada and Mexico, while the Persian Gulf countries account for only 18% of our net imports. The biggest impact the United States could have on oil and gasoline prices is not on the supply side, it's on the demand side. We account for close to 25% of the world's petroleum consumption, even though we account for less than 5% of the world's population. The best way to continue reducing our demand for crude oil and gasoline would be to promote fuel efficiency with higher CAFE standards. We've made progress. We're doing better. We know we can do better than our current standards. Replace conventional fleet fuels with alternative fuels such as propane, natural gas, and biofuels. That will help us consume less oil. Electrify transportation, focusing on hybrid and plug-in electric technology. Here you get jobs here in the United States, helping our economy as well as helping our energy security. And boosting transit ridership by increasing funding for the Federal Transit Administration. People don't like to be stuck in traffic jams. Let's have a modern transit system that can help move our people. Eliminating the tax expenditures that big oil could generate over $20 billion over the next 10 years. This is the bill we're talking about, S-2204, the Menendez bill. It takes the revenues that we are giving to the oil industry and using it to help pay for these green energy measures. This makes a lot of sense. Now, it will hardly be noticed by the big 5 oil companies, BP, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, ExxonMobil, or Shell. They made record profits in 2011, $137 billion. Now, I talked about $20 billion over 10 years. They made $137 billion in 1 year. That was up 75% from 2010. From 2001 through the last year, big oil has made more than $1 trillion in profits. Every penny increase in a pump increases their profit by another $200 million. So as we're suffering with prices going up, the big oil companies are making more, and we're still giving them the subsidies, where we could be using those subsidies to help America develop alternative energy sources. Big oil has been getting big subsidies for 100 years. It's time to end the subsidies and use that money for developing alternatives to oil. That's the best and most sustainable way to address the high cost of gasoline at the pump. S-2204 will help us bring down the cost at the pump. It's good for our economy, good for our environment, and good for our national security. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.
Who's next on?
Mr. President.
The senator from Vermont is recognized for 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the skyrocketing price of gasoline is clearly causing tremendous hardship to American families all across this country, the small businesses, the truckers, the airlines, and in fact to the entire economy. We're trying to claw our way out of this horrendous recession, and the high price of oil and gas is not helping us. Mr. President, I come from a rural state, and it is a state where people often drive 30, 40, 50 miles to work and back home again. And many of these workers make $10, $12, $14 an hour, and when the price of gas goes up to $4 a gallon, this is money that is just coming right out of their paychecks, and it's money that they can ill afford to pay. Many of them have seen stagnation in wages, and these high gas prices are doing their families severe harm. Further, Mr. President, I think the American people understand that our good friends at the oil companies continue to do phenomenally well in terms of the profits that they are making. In the last decade, the major oil companies in this country have earned $1 trillion in profit, while gas prices have soared. The Repeal Big Oil Tax Subsidies Act that we are debating today is a step in the right direction. This legislation would repeal more than $20 billion in tax breaks to the big 5 oil companies and use roughly half of this money to extend renewable energy tax credits and use the other half for deficit reduction. Over the past decades, our friends at ExxonMobil, among others, have seen more profits in ExxonMobil in a given year than any other corporation in the history of the world. Meanwhile, many of the largest oil companies over the years have paid little or no federal income taxes. And, Mr. President, let me just give you an example. In 2009, ExxonMobil, again, which has made more profits on a given year than any corporation in history, in 2009, ExxonMobil made $19 billion in profits while receiving a $156 million refund check from the IRS. Now, how's that, Mr. President? Pretty good deal? Made $19 billion in profits, did not pay any federal income taxes, and yet received a $156 million refund check from the IRS. In 2009, Chevron received a $19 million refund from the IRS after it made $10 billion in profits in 2009. Not a bad deal. In 2009, Valero Energy, the 25th largest company in America with $68 billion in sales, received a $157 million tax refund from the IRS. ConocoPhillips, the 5th largest oil company in the United States, made $16 billion in profits from 2007 through 2009, but received $451 million in tax breaks through the oil and gas manufacturing deduction. At a time when the American people are getting ripped off at the gas pump, the last thing that we need to be doing is giving big oil companies massive tax breaks, which only add to our deficit and national debt crises. But, Mr. President, in my view, we have got to do more than simply end these outrageous tax breaks that big oil has enjoyed. In my view, we must also end excessive oil speculation on the oil futures market. There has been a major debate over the last several years as to whether spikes in oil prices are caused entirely by the fundamentals of supply and demand, or whether excessive speculation in the oil futures market is playing a major role. Mr. President, that debate is over. That debate should be put to rest. Let's simply look at the facts. When we were in elementary school and in high school, we learned that what supply and demand is about is that when supply is high and demand is low, prices go down. When demand is high and supply is low, prices go up. The reality of the matter is that today the supply of oil and gasoline is higher right now than it was 3 years ago, when the national average price for a gallon of gas was just $1.96 a gallon. More supply than 3 years ago when gas was $1.96 a gallon. In terms of demand, the demand for oil in the United States today is at its lowest level since 1997. Internationally, during the last quarter of 2011, world oil supply exceeded demand by nearly 2 to 1, while at the same time, crude oil prices increased by over 12%. So let me recapitulate. Supply is high, demand is low, and yet oil prices are going off the roof. What's happening? Well, what's happening now is that there is a growing consensus within the business community, among economists, among people who study this issue, that the reason that oil prices are soaring is that excessive speculation on the oil futures market is the cause. ExxonMobil, Goldman Sachs, the IMF, the St. Louis Federal Reserve, the Saudi Arabian government, the American Trucking Association, Delta Airlines, the Petroleum Marketers Association of America, the Consumer Federation of America, all of these groups are involved in one way or another in studying oil prices. That's what they do, because many of them are affected by high oil prices. Others of them are consumer groups studying the impact of high oil prices. And all of them have agreed that excessive oil speculation significantly increases oil and gas prices. And that's the conclusion that more and more observers are making. Interestingly enough, Goldman Sachs, perhaps the largest Wall Street speculator on the oil futures market, recently came out with a report indicating that excessive oil speculation is costing Americans 56 cents a gallon at the pump. This is the conclusion of Goldman Sachs, perhaps the largest speculator on the oil futures market themselves. Now, I personally believe, and many others believe, that that number is low. But it is important to understand that we now have a major speculator telling us what excessive speculation is doing in terms of gas prices. Mr. President, last year the CEO of ExxonMobil, not one of my best friends, not a company that I particularly trust. But ExxonMobil's president last year testified at a Senate hearing that excessive speculation on the oil futures market contributed as much as 40% to a barrel of oil. In fact, Mr. President, Bloomberg News reported on March 26, 2012, that according to Commodity Futures Trading Commission data, bets on rising gasoline prices advanced for 11 weeks through March 6 to the highest level in records dating back to 2006. Gary Gensler, the chairman of the CFTC, has stated publicly that oil speculators now control. Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent for 5 additional minutes. Okay.
Without objection, so ordered.
Gary Gensler, the chairman of the CFTC, has stated publicly that oil speculators now control over 80% of the energy futures market, a figure that has more than doubled over the last decade. In other words, the vast majority of oil on the oil futures market is not controlled by people who actually use the product, not controlled by airlines or trucking companies or fuel dealers, people who actually use the product, but over 80% of the oil futures market is controlled by people, by speculators, whose only function in life is to make as much profit as they can by buying and selling oil futures. Let me give you just, Mr. President, let me give you just a few of the oil speculators and how much oil they were trading on June 30th, 2008, when the price of oil was over $140 a barrel and gas prices were over $4 a gallon. On that day, Goldman Sachs bought and sold over 863 million barrels of oil. Morgan Stanley bought and sold over 632 million barrels of oil. Bank of America bought and sold over 100 million barrels of oil. And the only reason these companies were on the oil futures market was to make as much profit as possible. They do not use the end product. Mr. President, we have got to make sure that price of oil and gas is based on the fundamentals of supply and demand and not Wall Street greed. To correct this problem, I've introduced S-2222 with Senators Blumenthal, Feinstein, Testa, McCaskill, Klobuchar, Levin, Franken, Sherrod-Brown, Cardin, Mikulski, Casey, Bill Nelson, Begich, and Pryor. This legislation, which I have filed also as an amendment to this bill, requires the CFTC to use all of its authority, including its emergency powers, to eliminate excessive oil speculation. I should point out that this emergency directive in our bill is identical, and I want my Republican colleagues to hear this, is identical to bipartisan legislation that overwhelmingly passed the House of Representatives in 2008 by a vote of 402 to 19, with significant, large-scale Republican support. Mr. President, the Dodd-Frank financial reform bill stipulated very clearly that the CFTC needed to eliminate, prevent, or diminish excessive oil speculation by January 17, 2011, 14 months ago. They have not done it. The CFTC has not obeyed the law, and it's time for Congress to tell them that breaking the law is not acceptable, and what they have got to do is, in fact, defend the consumers of this country. Mr. President, in my view, what this legislation would accomplish is that by immediately curbing the role of excessive speculation in any contract market within the jurisdiction and control of the Commodities Futures Trading Commission on or through which energy futures are traded. That's what this amendment does. It also eliminates excessive speculation, price distortion, sudden or unreasonable fluctuations, or unwarranted changes in prices or other unlawful activity that is causing major market disturbances that prevent the market from accurately reflecting the forces of supply and demand for energy commodities. Bottom line, Mr. President, Congress has got to tell the CFTC to obey the law, that they've got to use their emergency powers to end excessive oil speculation. And when we do that, I believe we will see oil prices go down. So, Mr. President, I ask for bipartisan support of my legislation. Thank all of the co-sponsors who are already on the bill. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.
Senator from Michigan.
First, let me thank Senator Sanders for his leadership in this area of excessive speculation. I'm going to have more to say about that in a few minutes, but before he leaves the floor, he's taken a major role in trying to get the CFTC to carry out what the law requires that they do, which is to consider excessive speculation and to put a lid on it. They're authorized to do it without any doubt. That was our intention, and they should get about it. The bill that we're considering is an example of corporate welfare. It's an egregious, it would end an egregious example of corporate welfare, and hopefully we're going to be allowed to be on this bill, and we'll be able to defeat a filibuster and vote for cloture sometime, I understand, tomorrow. At a time when some argue that the federal debt is so out of whack that we need to cut funding for programs that provide food to hungry children or health care to our seniors, surely we ought to be able to agree that the most profitable corporations in the country no longer need these enormous subsidies. But here we are. Now, those oil and gas subsidies have not reduced the price of oil or gas. That's obvious. The price of gas is complex. I've said many times before, and I'll say it again now, that the huge increase in speculation plays an important role in the price, the high price of gas. The Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, which I chair, has spent years examining these issues, and the evidence is compelling and overwhelming that financial speculators have played a huge role in driving up gas prices at the same time that supply and demand have not significantly changed. To the extent that supply and demand have changed, supply is up and demand is down. So if market forces were really in control here, the price of gas would be going down, not up. Some estimate that as much as 50 cents on the price of every gallon of gas is the result of excessive speculation. And another huge portion of the price is simply the wide profit margin for the oil and gas companies. Now, I agree with my colleagues that we must do what we can to ensure that gas prices do not swing wildly and that they do not pull precious resources out of the all-too-tight budgets of American families. But I think we've got to focus on some of the true causes for the rapid rises and the swings in gas prices and not hide behind unfounded assertions that taking away corporate welfare from an already incredibly profitable handful of companies will somehow or other drive up gas prices. Study after study and expert after expert have told us that removing these subsidies will have no impact on those prices. For instance, Severin Borenstein, co-director of the University of California, Berkeley Center for the Study of Energy Markets, has said, quote, "The incremental change in production that might result from changing oil subsidies will have no impact on gasoline prices," close quote. And the nonpartisan Congressional Research Service has concluded that removing these subsidies would not impact gas prices because, quote, "prices are well in excess of costs and a small increase in taxes would be unlikely to reduce oil output," close quote. So ending these subsidies is not going to impact the price of gas. But maintaining these subsidies does impact taxpayers. These subsidies take money from the vast majority of taxpayers to simply add to the already astronomical corporate profits of oil and gas companies. Just 5 companies last year reported a profit of $137 billion. Over the past 10 years, the profits of just these 5 companies have totaled nearly $1 trillion. That's trillion with a T. These astronomical numbers can really only be thought of in connection with the only other number of that size, which is similar, and that's the federal budget. Congress must soon enact deficit reduction of at least $1.2 trillion, or our nation and our economy is going to face sequestration, facing the slashing of programs that impact nearly every American. That $1.2 trillion in deficit reduction over the next decade is about the same amount as the expected profits for just 5 oil and gas companies. These companies, which are reporting record profits while paying record low rates of taxes, should be paying their fair share to help get and keep our economy strong. While some complain that the United States has such an egregiously high corporate tax rate that companies fail to invest here, the facts show just the opposite. Just a short time ago, the Congressional Budget Office released a report that corporations paid an effective tax rate of just 12.1% last year, which is the lowest percentage in decades. Corporations pay extremely low taxes in the United States, and those rates have been steadily declining. Corporate taxes now make up a record low percentage of all federal revenues. The oil and gas subsidies should be cut and the savings used to pay for our nation's other priorities. That's why I introduced an amendment last year that would have cut just one of these oil and gas subsidies. By eliminating these unnecessary oil and gas incentives and adopting the bill before us, we would be able to preserve or reauthorize a series of other energy tax incentives and grant programs, some of which have expired and others in danger of expiring, all of which would help promote American energy efficiency and self-sufficiency. Extending these provisions will help lower energy costs for businesses and families, would help diversify our energy strategy beyond oil, and would reduce the dependence on imported oil that undermines our economy and threatens our national security. Among these important tax provisions are Section 45 production tax credit for electricity produced by wind and other renewable sources, Section 1603 program to encourage the installation of energy equipment, the Section 48C advanced energy manufacturing credit that promotes American production of items used in renewable energy production such as wind turbines and advanced batteries, the cellulosic ethanol credit to encourage production of fuel through renewable feedstocks, and the tax credit for refueling infrastructure that helps encourage installation of alternative fuel infrastructure and electric charging stations in homes and in businesses. These and other energy provisions which are in our bill are vital tools in our battle to reduce our dependence on foreign oil, to substitute alternatives for fossil fuel, and to promote and sustain domestic manufacturing. Energy is a huge cost for businesses in nearly every field. If we can improve energy efficiency, we can lower costs and increase competitiveness. Rest assured that our competitors around the globe are doing that, and we need to do the same or risk falling behind. Energy efficiency is also vital to national security, since our dependence on foreign oil from volatile regions of the globe is an enormous complication to our foreign policy. It leaves our economy vulnerable to actions by unfriendly nations such as Iran. The more we can loosen the grip that imported fossil fuels have on our economy, the more prosperous and secure we will be. So, Mr. President, rarely is the choice as stark as it is before us. We can continue corporate welfare for the oil and gas industry, which does nothing but add to those companies' corporate profits and the nation's deficit. Or we can end these subsidies and push for the priorities that will help ensure our energy future and reduce our deficits. I thank the presiding officer, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Rhode Island's record.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I first ask unanimous consent that Melissa Lane and Michael Johnson, fellows in my office, be granted the privilege of the floor for the remainder of the 112th Congress.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today and join many of my colleagues, including Chairman Levin, in support of the efforts to stop wasting taxpayers' money by subsidizing oil executives' huge profits. We need to end these wasteful handouts, reduce the deficit, and develop clean energy solutions. While the oil industry is thriving, making $137 billion with a B dollars in profits last year, Rhode Islanders are paying nearly $3.90 per gallon at the pump. Working families are being forced to cut back because of high gas prices. In turn, big oil companies should have their wasteful tax subsidies eliminated. We should be working to fuel the United States economy, not the oil cartels and big oil companies. That is why I am a proud co-sponsor of the Repeal Big Oil Tax Subsidies Act, which would put a stop to these wasteful tax breaks and use the savings to invest in clean energy that will create jobs, save money for middle-class families, and increase America's competitiveness in the global clean energy economy. Addressing gas prices and reducing our dependence on oil requires a smart, balanced, and responsible national energy policy. There are no silver bullets, but there are both short-term and long-term steps that we should take. In the near term, we have to be ready to respond to geopolitical events by making it clear that we are prepared to release oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve if such a measure is necessary because of geopolitical developments. We need to continue efforts to prevent excessive speculation and speculators from manipulating the market and needlessly inflating energy prices. And I have asked the Commodities Future Trading Commission, effectively our cop on the beat, to do that and sought to provide them with the tools and funding to achieve this objective. We also need to continue investment in smart growth policies to promote mass transit and next-generation vehicles and alternative energy. That is why I fought for these things like better fuel mileage for cars and smart investments in mass transit. Improved energy efficiency and developing clean energy technologies will help cut our oil addiction. Working with President Obama, we successfully persuaded automakers to double the fuel efficiency of cars and light trucks. After staying the same for over 20 years under the Obama administration, the average fuel economy of vehicles will be 35.5 miles per gallon by 2016. And the administration has proposed standards to further increase these standards to 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025. Combined, by the year 2025, these standards would save 2.2 million barrels of oil a day and save consumers money at the pump, an estimated $8,000 over the lifetime of a vehicle. These new standards will also help reduce the impact of future price hikes by weaning us off oil. In addition to protecting their unnecessary subsidies, the oil industry continues to push increased drilling as a solution to reducing gas prices. I support safe, responsible domestic oil production and the administration's efforts to decrease our dependence on foreign oil. Indeed, U.S. domestic oil production reached its highest level since 2003. The number of oil rigs in the United States has more than quadrupled in the past 3 years. And the U.S. dependence on foreign oil is at its lowest level in 16 years. Net imports as a share of total consumption declined from nearly 60% in 2005 to 45% in 2011. But when oil companies tap into resources on federal property, the taxpayer must be fairly compensated and assured it is done safely and responsibly. Therefore, the oil company should pay their fair share of drilling royalties and inspection fees to make sure what they do is done right. As chairman of the Interior and Environment Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee, I worked to secure an increase in the inspection fees for offshore drilling and will push for the same for onshore drilling this year. For all the sloganeering about domestic drilling, we know we can't drill our way out of this problem. And even the oil companies admit that the biggest factor in the price of gasoline is the cost of crude oil, which is set in the world market. It is not pegged to U.S. production. In fact, an Associated Press analysis of 36 years of Energy Information Administration data shows no statistical correlation, in their words, between domestic oil production and gas prices. Again, we need a balanced, well-thought-out national energy policy, one that will help reduce our dependence on oil and the amount paid at the pump. What we should not be doing is continuing to give away billions in corporate welfare to big oil while middle-class families see their gas prices rise. It simply isn't fair. And the oil companies who soak up these subsidies are effectively charging taxpayers twice for the same gallon of gasoline. Mr. President, middle-class families are struggling. Oil companies are not. I urge my colleagues to repeal these oil subsidies, make clean energy investments in America, and take common-sense steps to get our fiscal house in order. And I urge passage of this very important piece of legislation. And with that, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Oregon.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to speak for about 5 minutes.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a tough time for Americans. We all know families who are sitting around their kitchen tables struggling to figure out how to make ends meet. But those tough times have not extended to the boardrooms of the big 5 oil companies. In 2011 alone, those companies saw more than $100 billion in profits, a sum that's difficult to get your hands around, difficult to understand. What is $1 billion, let alone $100 billion, not in revenue, but in profits? Exxon is sitting on $8 billion that it has not reinvested. Shell is sitting on $13 billion, cash in hand. The 5 largest companies together, BP, Exxon, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, and Shell, have cash resources of $59 billion and have made nearly $1 trillion in profits over the last decade. Meanwhile, American taxpayers are not only being forced to hand over larger and larger portions of their paychecks at the pump, they're also being asked to have the share of their taxes go in additional subsidies to these large companies. Let me restate that. When you go to the pump and you pay $4 or more than $4, well, the oil companies make a tremendous profit. And there's nothing wrong with making a profit in America. But what seems wrong is that these same companies are then coming to these hallowed halls and saying, we want a handout from the general fund. Now, those companies know that there's many other pressing needs in America. Indeed, there are many folks who are hungry across our nation. There are many families who are hoping but cannot save enough to send their kids to college. There are many families who are pressed by the loss of our manufacturing jobs, our middle-class living wage jobs, who are finding that on service jobs they are having a tough time meeting the mortgage. So families are struggling, and certainly they would like to see this body say, we understand the challenges you face. We understand that the cost of tuition for your children is way outpacing inflation, and you're worried about the possibility of your children having the full opportunities that should be available within our society. That they're worried about keeping their home. That they're worried about finding that next job if their current job goes away. But they're wondering, why aren't we helping those problems with these funds instead of giving those funds away to the oil companies? The only explanation that they can come up with is the oil companies are very powerful. They can come here and talk to this chamber and say, you know, we just want more. It's more important for us to add to the billions we have in the bank than it is to have basic nutrition programs expanded in this country. It's more important for you all to give us money to add to the money we have in the bank than to address the desperate infrastructure needs that are needed around our nation. It's more important for you to give us a handout rather than a hand up to struggling families in this nation. Well, Mr. President, I disagree. I think it's more important to help our families. I think it's more important to help our children. I think it's more important to build our physical infrastructure for the economy of the future. I think it's more important to build the infrastructure through education, the intellectual infrastructure of our nation that provides both opportunities to individuals and opportunities and strength to our economy as a whole. Now, there are some who say that these giveaways reduce the price of oil at the pump, reduce the price of gasoline. Nothing could be further from the truth. We all know what's driving the price of gasoline. You know, demand is down because people don't have enough to spend. Supply is up, so it's certainly not demand and supply. But what we do have is a big increase in speculators. Speculators are going to the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and they're making bets that because of the crisis in the Middle East, because of the issues with Iran, because of the concern about oil flowing out through the Strait of Hormuz, that others will also buy oil futures, so they'll buy them too, and they'll make a lot of money on the way up. And the result is, for all of us, higher prices at the pump. So if you want to do something about oil prices, you take on the speculators. That's why in Dodd-Frank we gave the CFTC the ability to exclude speculators from that marketplace, to say you have to have positions, you have to have an end use for oil. But they haven't used that power. And maybe we need stronger bill here to be passed to suppress the speculation, since the CFTC is not doing its job. But what we know for absolutely certain...
Senator's time has expired.
Thank you. I asked for 30 seconds to close.
Without objection.
What we know for certain is that giving powerful oil companies the people's money to add to the money that they're keeping in the bank, the billions they're sitting on, will not do one thing to drop the price of oil. Let's help American families, not the most powerful who have no need for these funds. Thank you, Mr. President.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Kaka.
The motion to proceed on the Senate floor today relates to a bill introduced by Rhode Island Democrats Sheldon Whitehouse. It would set a minimum effective tax rate for people with higher incomes. The Senate version requires that taxpayers with more than $2 million in income pay a minimum of 30% in federal taxes. We expect that the measure will have a test vote after the 2-week recess in April. Right now, over on C-SPAN 3, we're taking your phone calls on your reaction to this morning's oral arguments on the health care law before the Supreme Court. We'll be airing the afternoon session at 3:15 p.m., also on C-SPAN 3.
Senator from Mississippi.
I ask unanimous consent that the floor be called to suspend.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. We continue to watch fuel costs skyrocket, shockingly so in the last 3 months, as the average price of a gallon of gasoline breaks records again and again for this time of year. Today, the national average, when I last checked, was $3.90 per gallon. When President Obama took office, Americans paid $1.85 for a gallon of regular gasoline. Now they're paying more than twice that price. With analysts projecting even higher spikes on the horizon, some are speculating gasoline prices could top $5 per gallon by the summer. And now Senate Democrats propose raising taxes on gasoline production. We hear a lot about an all-of-the-above energy approach, and that needs to be put into practice. This should include expanding access to America's plentiful resources. Instead, the President insists on a flawed energy strategy, such as using taxpayer money for high-risk projects like Solyndra, while delaying drilling in the Gulf. The President has slowed the permitting process, he has blocked leases, and he has supported higher energy taxes and more regulations. His actions have come at the expense of valuable opportunities for greater domestic energy. The gains that our energy producers have made are in spite of the President's policies, not because of them. The de facto moratorium on drilling in the Gulf of Mexico made it clear that strengthening the country's energy security was not a White House priority. The plan the President proposed for offshore oil and gas leasing for the next 5 years would open less than 3% of offshore areas for production. Then there's the rejection by the President of the Keystone XL pipeline. The subject of an extensive environmental vetting process, a project which would guarantee nearby available oil from our largest trading partner. The President may talk about the need for oil and gas pipelines and even try to take credit for the lower part of the pipeline that did not need his approval. But there's no denying that his administration is responsible for roadblocks standing in the way of a better national energy policy. The 830,000 barrels per day that the Keystone Pipeline would transport offers a 7% increase to current imports. Vetoing it keeps Americans vulnerable to spiking gas prices and the dangerous whims of energy providers from volatile regions of the world. High fuel prices can have far-reaching economic effects. According to the Oil Price Information Service, Americans spent more on gasoline in 2011 than in any other year in the past 3 decades, some $448 billion. For the average household, about 8.4% of the family budget, or $4,155, went toward filling up at the pump last year. Of course, it's more this year. This means consumers have less money to spend and invest in their local communities, ultimately hurting the economic growth we desperately need. In 2008, then Senator Obama said he would have preferred a gradual adjustment of gas prices. That same year, Energy Secretary-to-be Stephen Chu told the Wall Street Journal, quote, "Somehow we have to figure out how to boost the price of gasoline to the levels of Europe," unquote. This is the President's choice for Energy Secretary, someone who wants our gasoline prices to be at the $8 per gallon level that they're experiencing in Europe. This mentality has not changed since 2008. Earlier this month, President Obama said the only solution was to start using less. That lowers the demand. Prices come down, according to the President. He later asserted that, quote, "how much oil we produce at home," unquote, is, quote, "not going to set the price of gas worldwide," to quote the President. Somehow, using less will lower the prices, according to the President, but producing more will not lower the prices. In other words, the President believes in only half of the principle of supply and demand. Indeed, basic economics tells us otherwise. It tells us that alleviating demand can lower prices, but having a greater supply does that too. The argument that the President is trying to make, that domestic production is inconsequential, does not add up. Not expanding production forces American wealth to go overseas because we have to buy our oil from overseas. As Charles Krauthammer recently wrote in the Washington Post, "Drill here and you staunch the hemorrhage. You keep those dollars within the United States economy," and that's exactly what we need to do in these troubling times. According to the Institute of Energy Research, we have enough oil within our borders to supply our own fuel needs for 250 years. That's not Senator Wicker talking. That's not a presidential candidate talking. That's the Institute for Energy Research. 250 years that we have here in the United States, and yet they're being kept off limits by the administration. Now the administration wants an $85 billion energy tax hike. This new tax will not translate into cheaper gasoline, a fact my Democratic colleagues have in fact acknowledged. It will make it more expensive to produce, drive up imports, and hamper economic investment. According to a study by the Congressional Research Service, higher energy taxes will increase gas prices and likely increase foreign dependence, exactly what we don't want to do. This would ultimately hurt average Americans who depend on affordable gas prices to get to work every day, and businesses, small businesses that need fuel to transport their goods and services. We've seen how the administration likes to use taxpayer money on high-risk bets like Solyndra and algae. Instead of gambling on unproved ideas, we should be ensuring economic growth with policies that strengthen our energy capacity. We're blessed to live in a country with plentiful resources, and we are far from maximizing America's energy potential. Mr. President, I have filed an amendment to this bill, Amendment 1966. The amendment would establish a production goal for the Obama administration's 5-year offshore oil and gas leasing plan. It calls for 3 million barrels of oil per day and 10 billion cubic feet of natural gas per day by the year 2027. Compared to today's levels, this increase in production would triple America's current offshore production and reduce foreign imports by nearly 1/3. By setting these benchmarks for the output of oil and natural gas, we can make measurable progress toward energy independence. So I would propound this parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President. If we were on the bill at this point, would it be in order for me to offer such an amendment, number 1966, at this time?
If the pending question was S-2204, it would take unanimous consent to offer an amendment to that measure. because there is not an available amendment slot at this time.
Well, I regret that, and I hope that we can negotiate on both sides of the aisle, Mr. President, so that amendments such as this can be offered to set benchmarks. We could use an additional 3 million barrels of oil per day, 10 billion additional cubic feet of natural gas to help us attack this very serious energy problem. I would simply conclude by saying that today's high gasoline prices confirm the urgency of pursuing better energy strategies as demand for oil continues to increase across the globe. Taking steps now is essential to meeting future needs and bringing relief to the pump. And seeing no one who is seeking to speak, does the gentleman seek to speak? If so, I'll yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from North Dakota.
Request the opportunity to speak for up to 10 minutes on the pending energy